This hearing is nothing, from where I sit, is nothing but a handout to big tech. These companies will oppose any rules to reform their anti-competitive conduct, no matter what nation or state tries to hold them accountable. Republicans are concerned about other countries beating up on big tech. I'm concerned about big tech beating up on Americans. Most Americans are struggling. Huge, dominant companies that don't have real competitors are being pushed to have more and more power. But they're not being pushed to lower their prices or to make products better. We won't make life in this country more affordable if we don't commit to strong antitrust enforcement. Corporate greed is at the heart of rising prices. The fact is that both parties have failed to check the consolidation of economic power and the abuses of that power. Dominant companies have grown larger under both Democratic and Republican administrations. But here in the House Judiciary Committee, support for rigorous antitrust enforcement and merger review has been bipartisan. It was this very subcommittee that studied the digital market, released a report, and crafted antitrust rules to rein in big tech. Those bills were supported and voted out of this committee by both parties. That was just a few years ago. But boy, have times changed. Our bipartisan antitrust legislation failed to become law because of opposition from factions in both of our parties. But work still continued at the agencies. The FTC and DOJ sued big tech for breaking the antitrust laws. Many of these suits began under Trump, were continued under Biden, and now are again in the hands of the Trump administration. In the Senate, Republicans like Senators Lee, Grassley, and Blackburn, and Democrats like Booker, Klobuchar, and Blumenthal are still working to pass the same antitrust rules that started in this committee. Those bills are rightly targeted at big tech. For example, Senator Lee's America Act would reform or break up dominant tech firms. So why is it that today, here in this House committee, my colleagues across the aisle are characterizing those bipartisan bills as anti-American? Why is that? Because they target multinational big tech companies that Chairman Jordan seems to like. Today, Republicans in this committee are showing the wide gap between them and other members of their own parties, and more importantly, the gap between what they are pursuing today and what Americans want us to be doing. Their Senate colleagues, the Vice President, and Trump appointees at the Justice Department and the FTC all support strong antitrust legislation and enforcement. While our own government prosecutes American big tech companies for breaking the law and our Senate colleagues advance measures to hold big tech accountable, we are apparently supposed to criticize other countries for doing the exact thing that our own voters want us to be doing, that Americans are actually clamoring for. Countries around the world, including Australia, Brazil, Japan, South Korea, the UK, and the EU, did what we did. They studied the digital market, found dominant tech companies, found that they were abusing their power and stifling competition, and then crafted rules and brought lawsuits. The majority witnesses will claim that these rules and suits are unfairly targeting American companies, but that premise ignores reality. Other countries are actually trying to address the monopolistic power of big tech, power that poses danger to markets, democracies, and frankly, to public health. Power that can and must be checked through the enforcement of antitrust laws. We should be world leaders on this. We're Americans. Do we still believe in healthy competition? Why would we use time in this committee to blast others who are taking on the power of monopolies? Monopolies that are increasingly controlling our lives. Republicans will argue today that actions by other nations to address monopolistic power are discriminatory and unfairly target U.S. tech companies. But the only true examples of discriminatory and unfair law enforcement are right here at home. I have an idea. Why don't we clean up our own house first? The true threat to enforcement of antitrust law into American companies is the perversion of antitrust undertaken by the Trump administration. Under this president, principled and fact-based review of one company buying another is overruled in favor of deals struck by Hewlett-Packard's well-paid lobbyists, with government officials over cocktails at private clubs. Under Trump, Paramount's acquisition of Skydance was only approved after the president was paid tens of millions of dollars and a government spy was installed in the in the CBS newsroom. Under this administration, the president pardoned an indicted bid rigger. This is one of the few antitrust violations that are criminally prosecuted. The pardon came after the president played a round of golf with the alleged criminal's lobbyist. One round at Mar-a-Lago wipes away a possible 10-year prison sentence for a crime that Trump's own Department of Justice and FBI worked to prosecute. Keep in mind that the individual pardon was set to be deposed the very next day in a separate civil lawsuit, the government's Live Nation Ticketmaster case. So in one fell swoop, the Trump administration managed to undermine two cases important to protect Americans from being fleeced by corporate misconduct and greed. The United States has long stood for something better: predictable enforcement, independent institutions, and decisions grounded in law and evidence. When the administration treats antitrust as just another way to make a corrupt deal, when it weaponizes antitrust to achieve political goals and to reward its allies, it undermines the foundations of our market economy. Competitive merit, not political influence, to determine who succeeds in this country. Competition creates the pipeline of American innovation and prosperity. Isn't that what we want? Isn't that what we say what we want? What's better for all of us? Again and again, we have seen this administration do favors for their rich friends and allies while the rest of us suffer. Big tech and big media are allowed to get bigger, raise prices, and squash competitors. All they need is a seven-figure payment to lobbyists and secret deposits into the president's ballroom fund. And companies are taking notice. They see that the fate of any multi-billion-dollar deal is going to run right through the Oval Office. Right now, Warner Brothers is up for sale, and the two biggest bidders, Netflix and Larry Ellison's Paramount, are doing all they can to get the White House to favor their buyout over another. Paramount is going to the White House and hanging out in the presidential box at the Kennedy Center. President Trump promised sweeping changes to CNN after he renewed his long-standing criticism of the news channel. Not to be outdone, Netflix executives also paid homage to the president and visited the White House in recent days. Americans of both parties see this, and they don't like it, and they want us to do something about it. They want us to fight back. We should be doing all we can to address the real and present dangers that monopolies, especially media and tech monopolies, pose to our markets, our wallets, to consumers, to competitors, and yes, frankly, to the democracy itself. Big tech and big media are more than happy to pay to get their mega mergers approved or evidence against them thrown out. They close deals that lead to even more private economic power and control over what we watch, what we buy, what we see, and what we hear. Our chair, Jim Jordan, has long opposed bipartisan antitrust bills aimed at reining in giant tech companies and cracking down on their abusive business practices. In 2021, when we advanced bipartisan tech antitrust bills, he called them, quote, Democrat bills. Despite the support the bills continue to have from Republicans like Senators Grassley, Lee, and Blackburn. And now we're supposed to beat up on other countries for doing the thing that we attempted to do? Give me a break. Big tech and their secret million-dollar donations and backroom deals cannot be how this country enforces the law. We have to fight against monopolies wherever we find them, and we cannot and should not criticize other nations for addressing the big tech global's harms. I call on my colleagues to join me in standing up for the rule of law, for antitrust and competition laws to be enforced on the merits and the facts, not handshakes and favors and pay-to-play schemes. I look forward to hearing from our witness, Professor Roger Alford, about how far we have perverted the rule of law and what we must do to ensure that transparency, accountability, and justice rule the day.